National security depends on staying ahead of the threat. At Booz Allen, our intelligence and technical experts work together to integrate emerging technologies for the next generation capabilities. When national security depends on you, we're here to propel your mission forward.
Welcome Michael Orlando to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So yesterday when Tanya was talking and she talked about the new brand of the FBI and the old brand, I didn't realize that she was talking about me with my dark suit and my white shirt. Now, being an old guy, you have some historical perspective on things. And so here I'm going to talk to you about the changing landscape of espionage and counterintelligence and what we're doing. And I think through our conversation here, you'll realize that technology, our talent and data, particularly emerging technology, is really the area where we need to focus our efforts on. So let's go back to the mid-1990s and the early 2000s. Counterintelligence was definitely spy versus spy. Remember, Robert Haynes, FBI spy, 20 years, did a lot of damage. Aldrich Ames, CIA spy, did a lot of damage. Ana Montes, DIA, worked for the Cubans, did a lot of damage. And counterintelligence back then, at least from a domestic perspective, was really following around intelligence officers who operated out of the embassies, trying to neutralize them, control their sources, and that was that landscape. And then in the early 2000s, there was a realization that China was the rising power, and that was going to have to be the focus, was China. But we realized at that point in time that the Chinese intelligence service operated very differently than the Soviets and the Russians. The Russians predominantly liked to operate out of the embassies, not to say they didn't do other operations. What we noticed about the Chinese is that their intelligence officers like to operate from China using proxies in the United States. And besides traditional espionage, we knew they were trying to steal military secrets, military technology to help them someday reclaim Taiwan. And so what you then saw were in the early 2000s were the Chi-Mak case in 2005. Chi-Mak stole Navy technology. Nashawar Gwadia in 2005, he stole technology related to the B-2 bomber and stealth technology, cruise missiles. And then there was Greg Bergeson and James Fondren in 2008, defense policy. And then there was Greg Chong, 2009, Boeing, NASA rocket technology. So where are we today? So things have changed a lot. The services continue to collect on our classified information, but we've also seen them target every government agency that doesn't have classified information. Think about EPA. What does the EPA collect? Well, clean energy from automakers. That's of value to them. We're also seeing them target every sector of our economy. That's back to our talent, our people, our technology, and our data. But this didn't just start recently. This goes back to around, I would say, 2012 was probably one of the first indications that I saw firsthand of that pivot. And I go back to the Monsanto case, the seed case. So in 2012, I was the acting chief for East Asia for FBI counterintelligence. If you notice my resume, I'm always the acting, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And we were doing the afternoon brief with the head of counterintelligence, case updates, operations initiatives, and then new developments. And my colleague who sat next to me, who had counterespionage, the law enforcement side, was doing his updates. And then when he got time to go over new cases, he mentioned, so last night there's allegations of Chinese nationals digging up seeds. And before he can talk further, the assistant director kind of cut him off. He's like, what are you talking about? Why are we investigating the theft of seeds, and why are the Chinese stealing seeds? So then he got on to his second sentence was, well, those seeds are worth $30 to $40 million. He goes, those seeds are genetically modified to be drought resistant and pesticide resistant. And so that kind of caught his attention. And that was kind of the first indications of this was a pivot to broader technology. And then the other thing that's interesting about that case is, based on the information I was able to find, is doesn't believe those 5 individuals were intelligence officers. The other thing that I thought was noteworthy is they worked for a company called DBN Group, and they had a subsidiary in the United States called King Nauer Seed. And they used King Nauer Seed, which had a facility in Iowa, as their staging base to go out and do this operation. So you see this asymmetric intelligence collection going on. And then at the same time, our colleagues in cyber had noticed a number of breaches, and they started looking at Chinese 5-year plans and noticing those breaches started to align with those 5-year plans. So the methods have also changed. In the last few days, I've heard a lot about cybersecurity, which is of course very important. But beyond cybersecurity, insider threat is the first thing that CISOs talk to me about when I meet them. Often they say, I understand the cyber, I understand the challenges, but this insider threat thing really concerns me. Now, if you look beneath the illegal, we're seeing a whole host of tools that the Chinese use as a whole of government effort to acquire our talent, our technology, and our data. And so you see how they use joint ventures, greenfield investments, mergers and acquisitions, talent programs. So let me give you a couple examples. Joint venture, DuPont. DuPont wanted to do business in China with their textile polymers, and they were required to do a joint venture. That company took their technology and was selling it. That was worth $70 million in value to DuPont. Regulators in China, Huntsman Corporation, sells black dye. They wanted to enter the market. They had to meet with regulators. The regulators asked a lot of detailed questions about their chemicals, only to find the regulators gave it to their competitors. Huntsman filed a $36 million infringement suit. Greenfield investment is a growing trend that has me concerned. This is when foreign countries come in and invest in our states because our local leaders need economic development, oftentimes give them a tax break for jobs. So Wuxi STI in Delaware, pharmaceutical manufacturer. If you look at their website, they say this gives us access to the American market and American talent, American data, American technology. Last year we were down in Arkansas and did some research on Arkansas. TY Garments, which I don't think ever materialized. And most people are like, why do we care that the Chinese are doing garments? Well, what was little known was that they were going to use something called the Sobot, which was an automated robot that would make t-shirts. So that goes back into the technology they were able to have. Not only are they using these techniques individually, they are blending them together. So many of you are aware that since 2015, China has expanded their legal landscape, and that legal landscape has to do with cybersecurity, national security, data protection, and it's their efforts to kind of expand oversight and control of foreign business in China. Every time I talk to an American business, one of the questions they're most interested in is, how secure is my data in China? It's not secure. Right? And I always tell them their lawyers should really look into these things, and many of them are. Okay, many of you are aware of Made in China 2025. So this is a roadmap to what they're trying to steal. As you may know, that not only does China want to produce these items, they want to design, produce them, and go global and compete with us. Let me give you a couple examples. Rail, China Railway Rolling Stock Corporation, CRRC. They invited Western rail companies in for high-speed rail, did joint ventures, started making the parts for the train, eventually were able to compete with the Westerners domestically, and now, according to them in the industry, they own 70% of the high-speed rail market globally. That is what they're trying to do in every one of these sectors. I'll give you another example. Aviation. Many of you are familiar with the Comac C919, the Chinese aircraft. They've done a joint venture with GE and Safran to build an engine. At the same time they were building the engine, the Chinese state-owned enterprise was going to build their own engine. And they used the intelligence service to do cyber intrusions, and when they weren't able to completely be successful, they recruited insiders to facilitate those cyber intrusions. So another example of a whole government effort to get our technology. So now I get to emerging technology. Last year, we talked about this. To me, this is where the game is really played. This is the real competition with China, is science and technology. Last month, former CEO Eric Schmidt did an article with others about these technologies. They said global leadership for these technologies will be decided by 2030. And if we lose, it will be a dark place for democracy. We can't afford to lose any of these. If we lose these, we'll be at a distinct disadvantage. And so this is where I see the counterintelligence force really have to figure out how do we protect these technologies. Now, when I go out to companies, they always say they want intelligence, but they really want evidence. They want a news story, right? So let me give you examples of how these technologies are being targeted. So the first one, when it comes down to bioeconomy, recently the FBI arrested an Army major and a doctor from Johns Hopkins for trying to sell confidential health information to the Russians. Now, luckily, the FBI interdicted it. What I thought was interesting wasn't that this was the case of the century, but now you have insiders who recognize that health information is of value and something the foreign services want. One of these individuals actually had a clearance for secret information, didn't offer up secret information, went with the healthcare information. Continuing in bioeconomy, NCSC has talked a lot about BGI. Here's an example of how the Chinese government used acquisition. BGI bought Complete Genomics and now does low-cost genomic testing and sequencing, probably subsidized by the Chinese government, acquiring American DNA. We also know that BGI has done paternal tests around the world and have collected 8 million women's DNA and has shared it with the Chinese government that they didn't know about. We also know that BGI partners with the PLA in research and uses their supercomputer. This is very concerning because when you get into bioeconomy and AI, data feeds into precision medicine, it feeds into artificial intelligence. When I talk to like the experts in AI about what we really need to protect, oftentimes they go back to protect the data, because even though they've collected a lot of data, it goes stale and they need new data. So there's things we need to do to protect our data moving forward. Then there's semiconductors, and here's another great example of blended operations. You see the Chinese government has invested $150 billion. We see them, particularly 2021, a number of attempted acquisitions of Western semiconductor companies, and we will continue to see them to try to acquire Western companies, concealing their hand. And talent poaching is another thing. Why do you need to steal anything if you can steal the talent? We've seen in China American semiconductor companies withdrawing, partly because they were losing their talent. And we've seen the Chinese government set up operations in Taiwan, trying to hire Taiwan talent while concealing they were Chinese, pretending to be Taiwanese. And then we continue to see insiders in the semiconductor industry. Just a month ago, a former Broadcom engineer was sentenced for his attempts to steal technology from them. Quantum. So quantum will do a lot of things, but one of the things that is concerning, it will break encryption. And so one of the things I tell venture capital and private equities is stop investing in Chinese quantum companies. You're investing in someone who's going to break our encryption. So what do we see in quantum? Again, more blended operations, $10 billion investment by the Chinese government. We've seen Chinese talent, the father of quantum, Pan Jinwei, who is educated in Germany, and he recruits from Western talent. Now let me be clear, we need foreign talent and we need to keep foreign talent here. So there's a concern about that as well. Research partnerships. We've seen the Russians partner with MIT, with the Skoltech Institute, doing all sorts of research on emerging technologies and quantum. This was, I thought, a page out of the Chinese book here. Luckily, MIT has finally shut this program down. And then we've seen insiders. We have the Dutch who identified a Russian quantum researcher at a Netherlands university who is meeting his handler in Germany. Artificial intelligence. We're getting a little bit concerned about the investment in our startups. And Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology had done this report, and they had identified that Chinese investors are more likely to invest in AI than any other country, and that China was more likely to invest in American AI than any other industry. Now, although there's not necessarily anything or proof of anything wrong, but we do know they get access to financial data, strategic plans, and R&D priorities, which is concerning. And then the last technology, autonomous systems. Although China is a leader in UAVs, this is a good example of them trying to acquire an Italian military drone company. You see the chart on the right, it's very complicated. Well, that is the web of shell companies they use in this acquisition. And one of the companies is CRRC, the rail company I spoke about. What are they doing investing in military drones. So this is a very concerning activity. So now that I laid out the landscape, what do we do about it? So first, let me talk to you about what we're doing at NCSC. So last year, we rolled out our Emerging Technology campaign, which was really an educational effort. This year, we're rolling out our Safeguarding Science campaign. We're working with the National Science Foundation, NIST, HHS, and other agencies to help build resiliency in the research community so that they can build their own programs. We're providing them all the material we have that we've used in the government to build insider threat programs, cyber programs, case studies, and work with them more in a consulting capacity to meet their culture so they can better protect themselves. Also at NCSC, one of the things that we're required to do is a national strategy every 3 years. That is up in 2022, and so 2023 is a new strategy. We've been working on this for a year with the counterintelligence community. And we've done a real good job of integrating the counterintelligence community. I've never seen this community more aligned than I have today. And we're aligning, not just writing a strategy document, but we're making sure that it implements all the way down to the operations and that it feeds into our outreach and that we get better alignment with our cyber friends. So what else does the community need to do moving forward? So in my view, in counterintelligence, there's really 3 components of it. There's the defensive counterintelligence, the law enforcement aspect, the disruption. And we need to continue to do that, but we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. And so there needs to be other things. There's offensive counterintelligence. We've been accused of not doing that, which is good, which means we've been really good with our OPSEC, because we do a lot of offensive operations. And for the Russians and Chinese, the next time they steal our emerging technology, they might want to pause to wonder if American counterintelligence had got to it first. But the last component, which I think is the most important component moving forward, is the outreach and partnerships. We have to educate government agencies, the private sector, how to better protect themselves so they are not fooled into doing these things. We have met with companies who have done investments and didn't realize what they were doing, but only through education and partnerships are we able to do that. So thank you for your time today.